Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is a stream, as you can see from the title. We're going to go into a number of different things concerning Batman v Superman. We're going to look at some release of Snyder Cut information, as well as we're going to look at comic book movies. Psalms 35 says, Plead my cause, O Lord, with them that strive with me. Fight against them that fight against me. Take hold of shield and buckler, and stand up for my help. Draw out also the spear, and stop the way against them that persecute me. Say unto my soul, I am your salvation. Let's stop right there. You know, I'm worried about the future in my personal life with regards to certain things happening in it. And certain things about myself I don't see changing, which are not positive. And I personally sometimes worry. But this scripture comes up to remind me that as we appeal to God, He will answer us. As we appeal to love, love hears us. And these are very important things to remember as you try to shine positivity and light in the world. Most people who do things that people have not seen before receive uh, receptions that are mixed sometimes, or even quite frankly negative, because you're doing something people don't think is possible, or they don't think is acceptable, even though it's something positive. And so you find when you're charting a road less traveled, not that somebody else hasn't traveled that road before and set the precedent for you to travel it, but something that's less traveled, or a road that people don't think is worth traveling, but it's a positive road, you will encounter this. I want to speak to you guys and say, never be afraid to be a front runner. Never be afraid to be somebody on the front lines, taking the punishment to get where you have to go. And sometimes you are your worst enemy. Sometimes you are the person keeping you back. You are the person sabotaging yourself. Continue onwards anyway, because God is greater than us all. Love is greater than us all. And I use love and God in the same sentence together because I want you guys to understand that God is more than just a personality or a character in a movie. That attributes and virtues go beyond that. That's why I love the DCEU, and that's why I love the way how everything I've studied in the Bible, everything I've read about, everything that since I've been born again, I believe, literally I saw that depicted on the screen, that it's these values that are most important. These are the things that created this world. Love, joy, you know. All right, let's move on. So let me show you some things about BvS. So the first thing in front of you, I put this up on social media, was Lex Luthor. I've learned to take absolutely nothing that Lex Luthor says for granted. I mean, Lex Luthor literally is a sleeper on every single thing. Every single word that comes out of his mouth is very interesting. Chris Terrio sculpted and crafted this guy in such a manner that everything he says literally has significance. So remember when Lois Lane arrives on the top of LexCorp and Lex Luthor greets her. He says, his first words are, plain low in the morning, Lola in slacks, Lois Lane. And I thought Lola mean, like Lolita, Lola, pretty woman in slacks. I thought that was what Lex Luthor was saying, but that was not what he was saying. Literally, it's an Easter egg to the creation of Lois Lane by the writers of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster. And below here explains this. So let me just blow it up a little bit so you guys can see. So Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster first conceived Lois Lane in 1934 when they were still developing Superman. One of the major influences on Lewis's character was actress Glenda Farrell and her portrayal of the fictional reporter Torchy Blaine. And here's Glenda Farrell right down here. This is Torchy Blaine here. Torchy Blaine, the lady bloodhound with a nose for news. All right? In a series of Warner Brothers films, the Torchy Blaine movies were popular second features during the late 1930s. On the conception of Lewis Lane, Jerry Siegel stated in the 1998 Time magazine, "My wife, Joanne, was Joe's original art model for Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane, back in the 1930s." And this is Joanne Carter here. As you can see, Lois Lane has the same kind of hairstyle and sort of profile that Joanne Carter has. She later becomes Joanne Siegel, which is Jerry Siegel's wife. Okay. Right. Our heroine was, of course, a working girl whose priority was grabbing scoops. What inspired me in the creation was Glenda Farrell, the movie star who portrayed Torchy Blaine. And you can see Glenda Farrell right here, and you can see that she also resembles Lois Lane here. Now, Torchy Blaine was a gutsy, beautiful headline hunting reporter in a series of exciting motion pictures. Because the name of the actress Lola Lane, who probably replaced Glenda Farrell as Torchy Blaine, this is Lola Lane here, okay? Because the name of the actress Lola Lane, who also played Torchy, appealed to me, I called my character Lewis Lane. So Lola Lane was the actual name of the actress who was playing Torchy Blaine. Strangely, the characterization of Lewis is amazingly like the real-life personality of my lovely wife. Of course, this is Jerry Siegel speaking here. So you can see that literally Joanne Carter, who was a model, Lois Lane is actually her character. It comes off of her. The inspiration for the actual formation of what this character would do and her occupation was based off of Glenda Farrell, who was Torchy Blaine, and her name literally comes, part of her name at least, from Lola Lane, who played Torchy Blaine as well. All right, and I thought that was very interesting. Like Torchy Blaine was a very big influence. But let's just backtrack back up to what Lex Luthor said. Plain low in the morning. Plain low. The helicopter came in. It's a play on words again. Plain low in the morning. So the plane comes in low in the morning. All right. So he's playing on the word low a lot because Lois Lane's nickname by Superman is Low, as you would know. So plain low in the morning. So it's a double meaning word, meaning here's plain Lois Lane in the morning. Lola in slacks, and that he's really speaking to the formation of Lois Lane, which is Lola Lane in slacks. That's kind of cool, huh? And then he says Lois Lane. I thought it was just so dope how Chris Terrio took all of that and packed it into one sentence. And that's a lot of thought for one sentence. And that shows you again, a lot of people say that, Lex Luthor is the Joker. He ain't no Joker. This guy played chess, not poker. He played chess, not poker. Let me say that again. He plays chess, not poker. Poker is, I'm gambling, I'm going to call your bluff. That was the Joker, right? Random kind of guy, but he called your bluff. Lex Luthor plays full game chess. He always moves ahead of you. And not only that, but everything he says is well thought out. It sounds like he's flippant. It sounds like he's funny. Everything he's saying has significance and meaning. It reminds me, as I said before, people when I was researching with, my professors and so on, everything they say to you, if they tell you a story, it has meaning behind it. If they say anything, any sentence, any word, it has meaning behind it. And that the reason why Lex Luthor appeals to me and he feels very real to me in the research area that I was in is because Lex Luthor is a researcher. Lex Luthor is a scientist. So it makes sense that the way how he behaves and even conducts himself has a lot of double meaning to it and a lot of layers to it. It now makes perfect sense to me why Lex Luthor felt so familiar to me. All right, so that's just the first one. We got more, folks. We got more. The next one is an Easter egg that paints up to a writer in of DC Comics, and you would never pick it up unless you really paid attention and you started looking and digging up certain things. So Jimmy Olsen comes and meets Lois Lane, and he's like, Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, photographer, of course. And the first thing she asks is, "Where's Huron? Where's Huron?" And I was like, "Huron? Who's Huron?" Right? And she says, "You know what Huron says when we're on assignment together? Not a goddamn thing. I like Huron." And I was thinking to myself, why would Lois Lane say she likes Huron? Who is this Huron, right? Who got caught up on the border, right? Who is this Huron? Well, let me tell you who the Huron is. And it's an Easter egg, by the way, just like what Lex Luthor said. Edward France Huron, who is this guy here, you're seeing, who's on the cover of his own comic book, which was Gangbusters. All right, as you can see, it's a DC comic. He was a DC comic book writer and editor, active from the 1940s to the 1960s. He wrote the story Batman Superman of Planet X in Batman issue number 113, in which Batman acquires powers. Now, just so you guys know also, he used to write, sporadic articles for different types of comics. And he was also the guy that created certain comic book characters. Captain Marvel Jr., he was the guy that created that character, amongst other characters that he created. Nonetheless, I digress. So here in Gangbusters, which was a comic in the 40s, you see him on the cover. This is literally him. He's the writer for the comic, and the editor for the comic, Jack Schiff, he behaves as if he's the thief here. And I thought that was really cool that they actually used real people in an actual, for the cover of the actual comic book. I thought it was really cool. Video games kind of preceded this, and they started using actual real people for their demos and intros to their comic book games, and then they would have the actual comic book characters in there. Anyway, the interesting thing here is that he actually wrote this comic inside of the Batman series comic. So it was one of several stories in there. And in that story, Batman has acquired the powers of Superman on the planet Zur-Eng-Ar, where he meets his counterpart, Batman of Zur-Eng-Ar. And because he's from Earth, exposure to radon on that planet gives him superpowers like Supes on Earth. But yet he's susceptible to, I think it's quartz. Is it quartz? No, it's not quartz. I think it's quartz. I can't remember. I think he's susceptible to quartz. So where Superman was susceptible to kryptonite, he was susceptible to quartz on Earth, right? Anyway, in the comic, he stops an invasion with his Batman counterpart. He stops an invasion of the planet. Actually, his Batman counterpart actually sequestered him to there. Okay, he was in the middle of doing something and he was sequestered. He ended up in that planet. A very advanced planet with high technology. Well, in Batman, the Brave and the Bold, the comic book series, the animated comic book series, he actually, they actually take from that comic that Huron actually wrote, and they changed it up a little bit, and it's called Super Batman on Planet X. So this is Super Batman on Planet X. I just show you little excerpts from it, where Bruce Wayne is Super Batman because he has these powers. So you see they're shooting blasts at him, and he's blocking them off just like Superman. Ratul, he is the Lex Luthor analog. So Ratul's like Lex Luthor, but you can see he's also mixed. He's dressed something like the Joker. So he's dressed like the Joker, but he's Lex Luthor. So it's sort of a combination of Superman's stories combined with Batman stories, you see? And he uses certain technology and stuff. It's very interesting. And then we see Vilsey Valor. Vilsey Valor is again a crossover between Lois Lane and Vicky Vale. Vicky Vale and Lois Lane. Vicky Vale from Batman, Lois Lane from Superman. Since Batman has kind of Superman-like powers, she's a reporter as well, just like both Vicky Vale and Lois Lane. And it's pretty interesting how that crossover goes. Batman's in that universe. The Batman in that universe, he's known as Delano, okay? And the Alfred counterpart is actually a robot, and he's called Alpha Red. So instead of Alfred, he's Alpha Red, which is pretty interesting. And so it's just interesting watching the story. The actual city is known as Gothropolis. So it's a kind of like a crossover between Metropolis and Gotham. And so everything about it is very interesting. And the Batman in that movie, of course, he doesn't have superpowers. He's kind of like Batman, but he has a lot of advanced technology. It's a very advanced city. And I thought this is very interesting because Lois Lane, she says she likes Huron in Batman v Superman, and Huron birthed this animated series in which we have Lois Lane in there. We have her relationship with Batman in there, but Batman is like Superman in there. Lex Luthor's kind of like the Joker, but he's also like Lex Luthor in there, but he's known as Rothal. And I just find it very interesting that she would use that name Huron, because Huron has this pivotal comic, I think, that really is an interesting comic to take a look at, where Lois Lane is actually in there, or a part of her at least. And so I just thought that this is something, a shout out, an Easter egg to something really, really cool that I wanted to share with you guys that I don't think anybody else has covered so far. And, you know, Batman v Superman is a thing that, you know, you can go into a lot of detail with. Oh, I misspelled assignment. Oh, boy. But yeah, you can go into a lot of detail with that and really enjoy yourself, you know, really have a ball, a blast. So I'm hoping that you guys enjoyed that part of it. There's still more in this video that I have to show you. By the way, you can always leave your comments in the chat section if you guys can hear me. I hope you guys can hear me. I'm not going to go and check my adjustments. I'm just going to keep it moving. All right. This one is a beautiful shout out and Easter egg to Tim Burton's Batman 1989. I want to show you guys right now. So I'm going to just play the video right here so you guys can see it. Again, I put this up on social media. It's fantastic how actually a deleted scene that Zack Snyder would have had in Justice League would have paid tribute to the Batman, Tim Burton's Batman 1989. I want to show you guys. There you see the moon in the background. And it's a slight variation of the theme, but still, it's beautiful to watch. I had to kind of splice together both the video of the trailer with the not so finished product that they were still working on with Cyborg. So bear with me on that. But look at this. It's beautiful. Look at this. Isn't that beautiful? You might want to see it again. So let me play it for you guys again. Okay, here we go. Look at that. I thought it was just fantastic that you know, both of them clear the clouds, go up towards the moon. Of course, Batman's symbol kind of silhouettes the moon, and then it comes back down. So he kind of just goes straight up and then back down. Whereas Cyborg, he kind of bends, makes a loop, and then speeds off. You know, but I just think it's just awesome that Zack Snyder pays tribute to Tim Burton, and he's done that a lot in his movie. In his movie, you know, if you look BvS, whatever movie, there's a lot of tribute back to Tim Burton, and even some tributes back to Danny Elfman. Unfortunately for Justice League, Danny Elfman did nothing to help Justice League. It was not the kind of quality of work we've seen in Batman 1989 or Batman Returns. And, you know, Zack was going for a much more serious tone. While I was always an advocate for, you know, I thought that Danny Elfman would be able to put the theatricals together, mainly because I thought Danny Elfman did the score for the sneak peek of Justice League. So I thought, you know, Danny Elfman had some of his hands on that, and you know, Joss Whedon had hands. That was not the case, and so you know, it really did not. You know, it was underwhelming. Let me put it that way. I mean, I saw it was a different take and stuff, and that's okay. I mean, it's fine and everything. It's not purely generic. There's some brilliance inside of there with Danny Elfman, but it's just underwhelming compared to what we were really looking for in the sneak peek. You know, and I had to apologize for it a lot. I was, you know, trying to make excuses for it a lot. And there are some brilliant things that Danny Elfman did in there, like the Flash theme, etc. But by and large, no. You know what I mean? So I wanted to show you guys that. And then finally, I've got one more thing I have to show you guys, I think. Yes. So when it comes to comic book movies, it's interesting when people tell me The Matrix is not a comic book movie. You know, Unbreakable is not a comic book movie. I actually had a discussion with these people. You know, King Kong is not a comic book movie, and Sucker Punch is not a comic book movie. They make this argument because they assume that there are no comic books for them, or the comic books came after. I want to tell them that Each and every one of those movies are comic book movies. I'll give you the arguments why I say they are, and then we'll go from there. So you guys can leave your comments on what you think. But first of all, The Matrix has comic books. Okay, that's the first thing. The Matrix is built off of anime and comic books. It's a comic book movie. Literally, the way how the movie's directed is as if you have comic book panels. Okay, so that's just the way how that it is a comic book movie. Yes, it didn't have a comic book. It didn't have a comic book at the time it was made. It's an original feature, but it definitely comes from anime. Literally, the ideas, the concepts, the way how the shots are put together and everything comes from anime, as well as it's a movie that's based off of literally how a comic book movie is told. And if you've seen the Animatrix, it's straight up like a comic book movie, right? So they would say, well, it's a superhero movie. I'd argue it's not as much a superhero movie as it is a comic book movie. The whole approach by Andy, at the time he was called Andy, and the Wachowski brothers, when they were called the Wachowski brothers at the time, was to make this comic book movie come to life. That was the whole point behind it. Those guys had delved in philosophy and all these other things, and they decided to do a pop culture comic book anime. That's what they were, in the Western world. That was what they were trying to do. So anybody telling me that the Matrix trilogy or the Matrix movies is not a comic book movie, I mean, I don't know what to tell them. You don't have to have a comic book to make a comic book movie. I'll give you another example of another comic book movie. And so let's just scroll a little bit down here. Unbreakable. Unbreakable is not just a superhero movie. Superheroes are comic book characters. And this guy just decided to create new superheroes. But clearly, this movie Unbreakable is inspired by comic book movies. Literally, Mr. Glass was holding up a comic book. He was a guy that dealt in a comic book store. Okay, this is a comic book movie. That's what it is. Split's a comic book movie. Glass is coming up as a comic book movie. These are comic book movies. It's not, you don't have to have a comic book, for these movies to be called comic book movies. They're literally about superheroes and villains, super villains. It's a comic book movie. So a lot of times people tell me it's not a comic book movie, it's a superhero. No, you don't have to have a comic book to make a comic book movie. It's how the movie is made. What's it based on makes it a comic book movie, right? I mean, this is not rocket science, folks. So I heard a guy saying that because there was no comic books there. Sucker Punch is a straight up comic book movie, and I'll explain to you why. Well, first of all, it's based off of anime, just like Unbreakable is based off of comic books, just like how The Matrix is based off of anime and comic books. Similarly, Sucker Punch is based off of anime and comic books. You look at the cover of Sucker Punch right now, it is the cover of an anime or comic book. Okay? That's the whole thing behind Sucker Punch is it's a comic book you're seeing on the screen. Everybody talks about graphic novels come to life. That's what Zack Snyder does. Well, yeah, then this is a comic book. Okay? It's a graphic novel, comic book, whatever you want to call it. But that makes it a comic book movie. Okay? All right, so you don't have to have a comic book to make a comic book movie. It's the style in which the movie is made in. It's the content of the movie. When you look at the content of the movie, are you seeing superheroes in there? Are you seeing supervillains? Not always are all comic books with superheroes and supervillains. We look at Dick Tracy's not a comic book with superheroes and supervillains. You know what I'm saying? You have Modesty Blaze, for those guys who know about that. That was an interesting run for a point in time. You have comical comic books as well. You have like Garfield, etc. You have comic strips. So once it's done in panels, once your story is constructed like a comic book in panels, or you even plot out your story in panels like that, and it has certain attributes that comic books have, then it's a comic book movie. That's what it is. And a lot of times people just don't get that part. Like they don't. The other thing is they talk about King Kong's not a comic book movie. King Kong literally has comic books from the 1930s. Okay, so before the King Kong movie came out, or even if it after it came out, there were King Kong comic books out there. Okay, they didn't run all the time, but there were King Kong comic books. All right, and this is one right here. This is a King Kong comic book. So anybody tell you that King Kong's not a comic book movie, they're not telling you the truth, even though it may not be classed like that in Box Office Mojo or some other place. It is a comic book movie. I argue that case, even though it's not a popular case, because again, we have to use logic and reasoning when we're talking about these things. And so that's the last thing of my videos I wanted to share with you guys. If you guys have anything else you want to say, please leave it in the chat section. I'm going to entertain your questions right now. And then I have to go off to work because I'm geared up to go and do what I got to do. You know what I'm saying? We got to do what we got to do. You know what I'm saying, baby? That's how it go. So let me see what you guys' comments are on this stuff. Oh, Go Films, man, you always there. Go Film says, hey, wow, Zack Snyder really likes Tim Burton. Yep, he does. Tim Burton's got a lot of creativity, a lot of imagination. You know what I mean? Go Film says, cool. I never knew The Matrix was a comic book movie. Go Film says, so Garfield is a comic book movie. Well, yeah, of course, Garfield is a comic book movie. I mean, Garfield is, you know, they had comic book strips and they have comic books of Garfield. Dennis the Menace is a comic book movie. I mean, you name it, they're comic book movies. You look at if they make Archie, if they make a comic book movie based on Archie, you know, they may have to modernize it, whatever. That's a comic book movie as well, you know. Which movie version of Bane do you like better, the Nolan one or the Batman and Robin one? The Nolan one. I prefer the Nolan Bane any day, anytime over the Batman and Robin Bane. I don't like Batman and Robin, first of all. Let it be known for the record. I like none of Schumacher's movies. I don't like Batman Forever, and I do not like Batman and Robin. Having said that, there are attributes in both films of Bane which are interesting. For instance, Schumacher's Batman and Robin, the Bane, he is actually more, according to the comics, how he gets juiced up, right? So he behaves more like the comics. The Bane in Christopher Nolan is you know, it's an adaptation. It's more, he's trying to get more realistic take on it. So he has a slightly different take on that Bane. Having said all of that, and the action sequences with that Bane in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Rises is exceptionally better. It gets your attention a lot more, and you can take Bane much more seriously, etc., etc. So yes, of course, Nolan's Bane is going to be the better of the two Banes, in my opinion. Again, just stepping back and just looking at it, right? I don't particularly like Nolan's The Dark Knight Rises either, right? It doesn't mean that I can't see the virtues and values in these movies. And when I have to speak, like, if I have to speak unbiasedly about it, I can say, oh, yeah, I can see where you see this, or I can see where you see that in Nolan's movies. Again, I'm not particularly a fan of his trilogy, okay? I thought it was boring. I thought that Batman Begins had an interesting take on Batman's beginning, but I didn't particularly like how, Christopher Nolan portrayed Bruce Wayne. And I can be very specific about that. I didn't like that Bruce Wayne was just way too over the top in terms of portraying himself as if he didn't care about anything. You know, I thought he was just way too over the top with that. I know Bruce Wayne can have that playboy philanthropist thing, but I thought it was overacted by the actor, I forgot his name, who played Batman and Bruce Wayne. I thought that, and then he had the lisp thing that kind of threw me off a little bit. And he's a fantastic actor, don't get me wrong. It's just I didn't particularly enjoy that. But that's my preference because I have a bias towards certain characters. I don't like a character that seems to play that they're hard. I thought that character, he was overplaying, for instance, the Bruce Wayne part of it, and then he would overplay the Batman part of it. And his voice, you know, he didn't ever feel intimidating. What I felt whenever he said, you know, you fear me, to me, he made me want to laugh. I felt like laughing at his voice. Like, what are you trying to do? Why didn't you just be yourself? And he's trying to force too much to be this intense Batman. He also reminds me of George Bush for some reason. I don't know why he reminds me of George Bush, but he reminds me of George Bush in the movie. So there's these little pet peeves, but when it comes to how the character was developed, how was carried along, etc., some things I didn't like, but I get where what Christopher Nolan was doing. I understand where he was going with the character. I understand he was trying to keep it very simple, very basic, trying to keep it as realistic as possible. We know that for instance, is the flying thing, the bat doesn't fly. Okay, the thing doesn't fly in real life, right? And so I didn't really particularly like the bat's shape or structure. That's, again, me. That's a bias. That has nothing to do. If I have to recommend this film, I would speak to people about what they would like if they like certain things in the film. So, for instance, that's why I said when you're critiquing something, you have to separate your biases from and understand. You must be able to recommend to people so people can get an idea of what kind of film it is. You're not there to bash it and say, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. You don't have time for that. Infinity War. If I have to do a critique or a review on Infinity War, first thing I do is I give my biases. I give my biases. I tell you why I don't like certain films and blah, blah, blah. Then I can go into why you would like Infinity War, why you would enjoy Infinity War. If you like this, this, and this, you will like Infinity War. You get what I'm saying? So you have to be able to, as a critic, because people are coming to you to see if the film is best for them. If you just go on a rant about how you feel and what you don't like and you're just all biased about it, then they don't have the direction. They don't trust you. They can't count on you. And that's the problem with these critics. They go to town on a movie. Oh, it's just boring and trashy. And then somebody goes in the film and really enjoys the movie and it's like, this person doesn't know what they're saying. That's what they say. They say the critics don't know what the hell they're talking about. Why? Because the critic is not trying to keep a middle of the road perspective. Yes, you can give your bias. Yes, you can talk about how it doesn't have enough jokes. And for a superhero movie, as far as you're concerned, it shouldn't be so dreary and heavy with the characters. And you would prefer at least some sort of buoyancy because you leave the movie feeling somewhat depressed and confused at the end. You can say these things. There's nothing wrong with doing that as a critic. But then you have to come back and say, but these are the things that this story was telling, which may be worth your while if you're someone who wanted something more in superhero movies. And then you go point by point with what the story was narrating. And then you can say where the story did not do that clearly and where it did it clearly and why you may not have liked the approach that it made with certain things. When you deal like that, man, anybody can listen to you because you build credibility. You're appealing to everybody. Now, the people who really would dig those kinds of films, they can't tell you anything because you gave a proper review. You gave it based on what you like, what you prefer. Then you separate that from what the film is and what it's telling. Then you say what the film came short with. Then you recommend to the film to certain kinds of people who would like those kinds of films. You have to be that way as a critic. It's more work. It means you can't just blah, blah, blah. It means also you have to be able to put aside and really think about the situation because some movies are obviously bad, right? They're obviously bad, but you must be able to look past that. You can voice it, but then you have to look at the content in the movie. You have to look at the type of movie, and you have to look at the people who might like that kind of movie. You have to be able to do those things as a critic, and they don't do it. I can say I don't like Batman and Robin. That doesn't mean that Batman and Robin has absolutely nothing in it. I mean, I like the approach that Schumacher had in directing his movies. That doesn't mean they don't have content in them. And so you have to go now and say, this is the story. This is the objective that Schumacher was going for. You have to be able to pinpoint that. Then you have to say why you think it fell short. Then you have to say that still, I think there are certain people who will enjoy this film, especially children, ages. And you specify the ages. When you can do this kind of detailed stuff, it makes for very interesting. It shows how reflective you are as a critic. It shows how thorough you are as a critic. This is what Ebert did. This is what the other guy in Ebert did. They broke down films. And even if they didn't like the approach of something and they said it's dark, or they acknowledged the points in the film, what the director was trying to do. And you have to be able to realize this is what the director was trying to do. This is the story that's being told. Now, how successful was it? When you can do it, and don't just recite a story, you must be able to show that you know what the story is. And that's when you got the story, And once you got the story, now it's up to you. Whatever you want to say after that is great. And you must be able to show the pros and the cons in a film. And if you can't show any pros, it means you're not a good critic. A good critic can show flaws, but you must be able to show the pros, what this movie was attempting to do. So that's the thing I'm talking about. And a lot of times these guys get paid a lot of money to just bash movies indiscriminately. And when you look at their breakdowns, you go and you look at the elaborate breakdowns on the movie, it's still not saying much. They're talking about their pet peeves and they're just writing these long stuff and they're collecting money for it, which they shouldn't be paid a dime for that sort of stuff, especially bias reporting. You must be able to state your bias. State your bias. Nothing's wrong with stating your bias. It shows this is what I prefer. Now we know what kind of films you like. So now I can step away from that and talk objectively. And then turn around. I don't want to hear people saying, you know, I listen to some of these critics and they say, well, I really wanted to like that movie. That means jack shit to me. Because if I like it, then you did not do your job. Your job is to let me know what films I may like because I have certain taste. That's why the films are in genres, right? So, as I said before, a lot of these guys, they're paid to malign films or bash films, and they can just say whatever the hell they want, and they have no consequence to what they're doing. And I find that stupid and shallow. You must be able to always, in everything. If I'm critiquing Donald Trump, I must be able to see what are some positive things that he's doing. I cannot just be looking at the negatives. I must also understand why those things are negative and why the things he's doing are positive. I must be able to separate the issues from the person. And a lot of these critics don't know how to separate a movie from a director. The movie has its own life. It has its own way of doing things. And you must be able to look at the movie for what it is, not the director. And a lot of people personalize these movies and start hating the movies because they know of a director's track record or whatever, and they start playing political games with the movie. And that's the stupidity of these people today. All right. But I've seen people like, what's his name? Chris on YouTube. And he started to critique movies in such a way that I really appreciate what he does now. I forgot what his surname is. And he's starting to take into account, that you have to look at all demographics. And while you speak, and maybe you speak for the majority of the demographics, you must also be able to highlight the positives in the movie, which may attract other people from other demographics. And you must speak about that so that when people go into the cinema to see a movie, they, Chris Stuckman, yeah, that guy is getting very good, right? That's what you need, a comprehensive review. And you can be saucy if you want. You can even throw a little sarcasm in there, you know, and throw a joke at the movie as well. You can do that too. But when you cover everything in the movie, when you cover it properly, then nobody can say anything. The people who love the movie, they're going to go see it. And they're not going to feel a how about it. All right? The people who don't like the movie, they're not going to go see it. So that's it. It's problem solved. And even if they go see it, they'll realize your review was spark on. And then they trust you for reviews. That's what you want. You want more people to come to get your reviews and to wait on your reviews. You know, Armand White, right? I respect him as a reviewer because he reviews movies in such a way that I enjoy them. However, he has a bias against movies which he feels are not good enough. Okay, he had a big bias against Star Wars: The Last Jedi. And again, you have to be able to highlight what Star Wars: The Last Jedi is doing. You must be able to judge the story for what it is. Forget the director, forget all those people. Look at it as its own organism and then go into it. And that's all I'm saying. You know, and once you do that, you know, if you got biases, obviously you can speak about them, but just put the framework out there. This is my bias. This is my bias. And then you can go from there. And then you must bounce it off by objective assessment of the film and then make recommendations about who you think might want to see that film. That's how you do it. So it's a lot more work than just blurting out stuff after you've seen a movie and eating popcorn. That's the era we're in, where people are now not thorough anymore. They're not taking time to do things. They're just blurting out stuff, and it's not cool. So let me get back to what you were saying. So yes, the Bane from Nolan's Bane is a much more thought out, much more realistic based Bane. I like realism. I like thought out stuff. So obviously I like him. I loved how they introduced that Bane on the plane and how they did their stuff. I just loved it. So that Bane, I think, is superior, even though not as comic book accurate as Schumacher's Bane, which was a much more comical take on Bane, even though he did have danger in him. It was a much more comical take on Bane. And there were certain aspects of Bane I really enjoyed, because I think Schumacher in that movie, he combined a number of villains. He had Mr. Freeze, he had Poison Ivy, he had Bane, he had a couple characters, and I thought that was, again, he did a pretty good job of putting the ensemble together. And his goal was to make a funny movie, right? He was going for satire to some degree, parody for some degree. He was trying to recapture the Adam West's era, the 1966 Batman, in this era where it was the 90s at the time, 1997. So he was trying to do that amidst this whole pool of very serious comic book movies that were coming out, and he was trying to get something a little bit different. He was trying to go a different route. That's what they hired him for. You could have seen that was his direction from Batman Forever, where he had those one-liners, and they were sort of, for me, they were clunky. If you were a child and you watched Batman Forever, my brother loves Batman Forever, for example. My brother loves Val Kilmer and Batman Forever. In fact, I know a number of people say Val Kilmer's Batman is the best Batman ever. All right, so different people have different tastes. But at the end of the day, my bias is that if you're going to be funny, but you're still trying to push realism, it's kind of tough. You know what I mean? And Schumacher, he's directed some really realistic movies, which were really awesome. But in this case, this particular movie, the take he was trying to do an attempt at, for me as a child, I didn't even enjoy Val Kilmer being Batman. For me as a child, I enjoyed Batman and Robin better than Batman Forever as a child, because it was much more playful. It was less serious. But the Batman Forever was still trying to be serious while still throwing these one-liners and jokes and having this kind of swoony, funny wackiness to it. And Jim Carrey captured what I think Schumacher was going for, which is funny but scary at the same time. If you look at Jim Carrey's character, not so much the acting of Harvey Dent. Harvey Dent was just out there, right? Not very smart, not really thoughtful. But when you look at Jim Carrey's performance, which was fantastic for that movie, I think that's what, to me, brought up the movie. He was freaky, scary, and yet he was funny in a very outlandish way. And even at the end of the movie, when he finally is, defeated, again, it's very kind of, it's on the border of scary. It's freaky, right? So again, when I look at Schumacher's work on Batman Forever, the Batman didn't get me. I didn't enjoy Batman. Okay, the introduction of Robin in there, you remember the introduction of Dick Grayson in that, it was so-so. But at the end of the day, what made this movie was Jim Carrey's performance. I always thought it was just brilliant. He had a brilliant performance in which he combined humor with darkness. It was a very dark humor, a very scary dark humor, because he was killing people and stuff, right? Throwing people out of windows, all kinds of shit, and making people do all kinds of stupid things. So, Jim Carrey's the Riddler, he reminded me of the Mad Hatter more than the Riddler, but it's another story for another day. But the Riddler was really edgy, really out there, and that made the movie for me. That's what, because Batman really had somebody to go up against, and was very smart, but yet at the same time was literally trying to destroy Gotham to benefit himself. It's insane. So I think that's what made the story for me. I know Batman was going through his issues and stuff, but I didn't care much for Batman. I'm gonna be honest with you. Now, with respect to Batman and Robin, yeah, Val Kilmer had some good moments. You're right in Batman Forever. You are absolutely correct. Again, Go Films. I'm not disputing. That's the thing. I said I don't like Batman Forever. I said I don't like Batman and Robin. But that does not mean that those movies didn't have some good stuff in them. You see what I'm saying? There was some good stuff in those movies. All right. And as a child, I really enjoyed Batman and Robin. It was a fun ride for me. I was looking forward to Arnold Schwarzenegger as Dr. Freeze, as Mr. Freeze. I really wanted to see that because on anything with Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day, I was in it. So I was like, Arnold Schwarzenegger's in that, and Kill Bill ladies in that. Hell, I'm on board. Well, she wasn't in Kill Bill at the time. She was just a sex icon. What's her name? You know what I'm talking about. Irma Thurman. She was beautiful. Everybody loved Irma Thurman. And so she was going to play Poison Ivy. So I was like, I'm on board. Irma Thurman's in that movie? Hell yeah. Because I was a teenager at the time. So it was Irma Thurman. Arnold Schwarzenegger was in that stuff. I wasn't hot up on George Clooney being Batman, but I didn't care. The Batgirl, what's her name? Alicia Silverstone or whatever, I think is her name. She was in the Batgirl. Was she the Batgirl? I think it was another girl who was a Batgirl. I can't remember, but she was in it as Batwoman, and then you had Robin in there. And so at the end of the day, I enjoyed the run. It was an enjoyable movie for me as a child, as a teenager. I enjoyed it. It was funny. As I got older, I realized, it's a bunch of crap. I saw it in HBO. I didn't go in the theater to see it, so I was just happy to see it on cable. But quite frankly, I understood what Schumacher was going for. I understood his take. I understood what he was trying to do with the world. And that's the thing that you got to get. You got to understand. I understand where the director's coming from with these movies. That's the difference. A lot of times people misunderstand what Zack Snyder's going with and what he's doing. But I think I get what Schumacher was trying to do with Batman and Robin. And I think I get what he was trying to do with Batman Forever. I'm not saying Batman Forever is a shallow film by any means. Again, they introduced Bruce Wayne's psychology. But I just didn't like how his interface with the Doctor. And it was all about, trying to get into the pants. Or she was trying to get in his pants and that kind of shit. And I was, it's just too cliche. There's a lot of cliche stuff said. And I just Batman Forever, actually, I like less than Batman and Robin, because Batman and Robin is just a ride, right? It's wacky, kind of, you suspend all belief, and it's just a ride. Batman Forever is trying to be realistic. It's trying to be like a 40s kind of drama, dark. It's still trying to be dark, and it's still trying to be funny at the same time. If you went all full Adam West with Batman Forever, which would have been terrible as well, probably would have flopped at the box office too. I think, he was trying to do a combination of things. And I'm not saying, again, you shouldn't do that with Batman Forever. He was trying to keep kind of the tone that Tim Burton started and transition. You saw the same thing with Joss Whedon. He was trying to transition from Zack Snyder's dark tone, or darker tone, to kind of more of a brighter tone. So that's what basically Schumacher was brought on board to do, brighten up the movies, because they told Tim Burton, your movies are too dark. But I don't know why, but Warner Brothers just did not get it, that like kids like me were like, keep it dark. I mean, one of the most longest lasting phrases out there is, I'm Batman. You know where that came from? That came from Tim Burton's Batman 1989, when I never forgot it as a kid. The criminal says, who are you? And then, Michael Keaton pulls the guy towards him as he had him kind of hanging over the ledge. He pulls it up to him and he says, I'm Batman. Tell your friends about me. He whispers it to him, kind of like, and then he just throws him aside. You know what I also liked about Batman 1989? Again, I grew up watching it, and I know that it inspired all those Batman animated series and all the Batman stuff. And everybody went really Batman crazy after that. There was the Adam and West Batman and stuff, and that was for the 60s. But when the 80s came, Batman wasn't that huge, right? When the 80s came and Tim Burton put out that Batman 1989, people couldn't get enough of Batman. One of the greatest lines in Batman that still is dope. When I hear those words from Nicholas Jack Nicholson, I get the chills. You know, Batman comes in, saves Vicky Vale, right? He points his what looks like a gun, but it's a grappling hook, points it at the Joker, and then he fires it, and it shoots out two cables, one behind him, one in front of him, and he just slides out of there and busts through the door and disappears, right? And the Joker looks at him. He looks at when he escapes from the route, because it's so unpredictable. You thought he was going to shoot the Joker, and that was not what he did. And the Joker says, "Where does he get those toys?" I love that line. That's after the Joker killed somebody and he used the perfume, you know, the acid perfume and all that shit. He says that. I was like, damn. And still to this day, that gives me the chills. That moment in the movie when he says that, you know, because he's in awe. The Joker's in awe of Batman. You don't ever see that every day. It doesn't happen every day where the Joker's just like speechless. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, Tim Burton's 1989 Batman, for me, again, this is just my personal opinion. I can always separate it, you know, from, you know, other movies and see it's dated now. I understand all of that, but still at the same time, Tim Burton's 1989 Batman is just dope as hell. And I love that Tim Burton did not move away from characters being killed in that movie. You didn't know if people were going to die or not. You didn't even know if Batman was going to die at a certain point, or Vicky Vale, you know, because they had it kind of up in the air. Characters would die, sometimes they won't die. You know, we thought, you know, in the beginning, you thought that Jack died when he fell into the acid, and then you realize he didn't die. You know what I'm saying? He came back. And even when he died as the Joker and they pulled open his pocket and saw the clock going, ha, 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 ha. You know, it's just one of those, man, you know, dang. Tim Burton was crazy, man. I would have loved to see what he would have done with Superman Lives. I would have loved to see that. And I love his edginess. Tim Burton got that edge, man. He got that edge on his movies. You know, that's what I loved about his movies, the edginess of them. And WB said, too edgy. Got to do it for the kiddies. You know what I'm saying? And they just screwed him over with Batman Forever. They screwed him over with that. They screwed him over with Catwoman, and they screwed him over with. I just don't understand why they would do something like that, but they did it. And they screwed him over with Superman Lives. Dude was going to put on, I'm pretty sure he would have put on something, again, revolutionary. And I think Zack Snyder's are kind of modern day Tim Burton. He's got an edge to him. You know, he gets the characters right, in my opinion, because Superman was always a pansy. When you see him, he's always softy. When you see Superman really kick some ass, first time we've seen Superman kick some ass on the screen in a real meaningful way, because he's a badass like that. You know, so, you know, other than that, Superman's pretty much Superman, but, you know, it was just nice to see that. And the epic nature at which when Superman is kicking ass, you know, it's epic. Like, it's it gets everybody's attention. He punches a guy, the whole world could hear that shot. You know, it goes like almost like a cannon. Wow. You know what I'm saying? When he was fighting General Zod in Metropolis, man, that was freaking epic. And then when he was fighting Doomsday and you know, on the Gotham Seaport, that was epic, man. That's an epic battle. You know, Batman has to go run and hide. Wonder Woman was like a badass herself. You know what I'm saying? Man, that's the way our comic book movies should be. And you know, it's just you know, that's how I picture comic books. I don't know about other people. You know, I haven't read a lot of Jeff Johns runs. But, you know, for me, that was what comic books were all about. You know what I mean? And so I don't know. I'm one of those old guys now. I'm in my 40s. You know, the young peoples, they probably have a different way of looking at comic books and everything. So, yeah. Who am I? I'm just an old fogey. Maybe trying to recapture the past. Who knows? GoFilm says Zack Snyder is the Tim Burton of this generation, and Joss Whedon is the Joel Schumacher. I think so. I think he's the Joel Schumacher of DC. I think that's a perfect example. But I think they're trying. I think Warner Brothers is trying to move in the direction of the Schumacher direction. They've been always trying to go Schumacher direction. Well, at least of recent times, because when I think back to why they even fired Richard Donner or Dick Donner, I don't understand why they do that. They just kicked him off of Superman 2. I still sincerely do not understand. They never let the guy finish his movie. You know what I'm saying? I don't understand it, man. Some things I just don't understand. You got a guy, what, he's demanding more money. Was just talking about creative. I don't understand. I don't understand it. And since they removed Dick Donner, they never were able to get a Superman movie right until Zack Snyder came on the scene with Christopher Nolan and David Goyer. Okay, you know, and they of course borrowed off of the successful television series Smallville. But the point is that, you know, they couldn't get him right on the big screen. They just couldn't. You know, they were getting him right on the small screen on TV. They were getting it Lewis, you know, Lewis and Clark. They got that right, and they got Smallville right. But when it comes to getting him on a big screen right, Zach's the guy that made it happen. He got Superman right. You know what's the funny thing? They did a poll recently, and they showed that Man of Steel is the best in the DCU movies thus far. That's so funny. And I'm gonna say this. I think as time goes along, BvS is gonna overtake Man of Steel, because the amount of content in BvS is ridiculous. Now, not the theatrical cut probably, but definitely the ultimate cut or the ultimate edition is definitely going to supersede that. And as I showed you guys just from the data I just gave you, that thing is full and brimming over with Easter eggs. It's also full of references to pop culture, as well as full of references to history, mythos, values, virtues. I mean, Batman v Superman, yes, it's a tragedy because Superman dies in the movie. Yes, it's a serious film. It's a solemn film. Yes, it has gravity and weight to it. All right, doesn't mean that Superman is emo or he's sad, because Superman's most of the movie he's not sad at all. He's not emo at all. Okay, but the people who are discussing him, they are in a very serious tone, or they're very negative or antagonistic towards him. Right, good. So get that out of the way. So Superman's not emo. But the world he's in is just like our world, and we don't necessarily like to be in our world. We want to get out of our world into some fantasy. So I understand why it was tough for them. All right. But for me, it wasn't the problem, because I watch movies like that all the time. And I didn't take it just as a superhero movie. I started to enjoy it as a horror, a thriller, you know, an adventure, action film, a drama. I started to enjoy it like any other movie I would see. Like, you know, we watched Scully. Scully's not this, you know, fantasy film. It's a very serious film about a guy going through some stuff after he had saved some people. And they were the powers that be wanted to actually label him as negative and that his choices were wrong. And he suffered for years under this thing. And he was appealing it and so on. And still at the same time, the people who were responsible were trying to get him out of his job. Okay. That's the Superman story from BvS, right? Now, for some reason, the critics say Scully's a great movie by Clint Eastwood, but Zack Snyder, because his name's on Batman v Superman with all that detail, all of a sudden that's a bad movie. Are you serious? You can't have that standard for Scully, which is a true story, by the way. And then look at Batman v Superman, which is giving a similar story, just grounded in realism, very serious movie. There's not a lot of hee ha ha in there. There's some jokes, but for the most part, it's not funny. All right. It's the same thing. The only difference is that people go into a comic book movie with the influence and the bias of what Marvel last put out, so that they're expecting a kick up and a lot of laughs. That's what they expected. And that's the truth. That's all to it. Batman v Super is not a bad movie. Even the theatrical cut, which has, you know, circular kind of way of storytelling, is still not bad. You know, and we started to see this bias continue with movies like Suicide Squad, and they didn't bash Wonder Woman because it was politically correct, and they wanted to see, you know, women superhero movies go forward, so they didn't bash it. But they were trying to. You could see all the negative press leading up to Wonder Woman, right? And then we had Justice League, and that's the movie that let most people down, because the fans literally were let down. The only reason Justice League didn't make it in the theaters was because the fans were let down. The real fans, the DCU fans that support Justice League, they were let down. Okay. And so they didn't bother to continue paying their money for a film like that. That's the only point. That's the only reason that didn't make money. Okay. And so at the end of the day, you know, I keep on telling Warner Brothers, you need to stick to what you do best. What you do best is films that are grounded in realism. You do your animated parodies, you know, like the Batman Lego movies and stuff. You can do your parodies and stuff, But look, you did King Kong, right? Which grossed more money than any King Kong movie ever, right? And if you look at it, it's a serious movie again. So why can't we have serious comic book movies? There wasn't a whole set of laughs and jokes in King Kong, right? There wasn't a whole set of laughs in Godzilla. Okay, so why we have to have a whole set of laughs in the comic book movies too? And this is my point over and over and over and over and over again. Split didn't have a whole set of laughs. Logan didn't have a whole set of laughs. Unbreakable didn't have a whole set of laughs. Okay, so why is it that people feel these Disney movies need to compete with Marvel movies? And all of those I just spoke about were comic book movies, right? Why do they think that these movies need to compete with Marvel movies and have laughs? Why do they need to have jokes? And then they hire a whole bunch of directors who have been doing with comedy. But I don't know if they're going to give comedy. That's another story altogether. If it'll be a comedy movie or it'll be a teaching moment. And it's more of a serious movie than a comedy. I expect Shazam to be a comedy. It's the character lends himself to being comical. You okay? It's just what it is. So I expect Shazam to be a comedy. I don't expect Aquaman to be a comedy. I don't expect Wonder Woman to be a comedy. I don't expect any other DCEU film unless it's a Green Lantern film, which a Green Lantern, again, lends himself, certain Green Lanterns, not all of them, certain Green Lanterns lend themselves to being comical. And it's just what it is, okay? So once the character is that, I don't expect a Flash movie to be comical, okay? I don't expect a Cyborg movie to be funny, okay? That's not what I come to see Cyborg for. Yes, there is a Cartoon Network Teen Titan Cyborg who's funny, but for the most part, you know, Justice League Action Cyborg who's funny. But for the most part, that's a parody of Cyborg. That's not Cyborg. There's nothing funny about Cyborg. And I just hope people keep the gravitas with the characters, keep the integrity of the characters, stop trying to parody and buffoon the characters. MCU is doing it, fine by them. You're not the MCU. Don't do it. All right, guys. So it was nice talking to you. Go Films. Let me show my face to you so you can see me before I get out of here. It's 3:24 in the day for me. So I'm going to be up and about and getting out of here. I hope you guys have a great day, man. Peace to you guys. I see that 5 viewers here. This is a lot of people watching. And say hello, man. Give a shout out. And by the way, you guys can also join this chat. So let me know in the future if you want to join up with the chat. And I'll let you guys join up with the chat. Okay. So that's basically all I got to say for now. Guys, have a great day. As to the Release the Snyder Cut movement and what we're going to be doing and proceeding with next, I'll let you guys know. There is a Facebook page, Release the Snyder Cut Facebook page that you could go ahead and check and like and get people to pool together there. But also, if Fiona Zhang does not put up a Twitter account with Release the Snyder Cut, I'm going to put up a Twitter account with Release the Snyder Cut so you guys can share that with some other people online. All right, guys. I hope you guys have a great one. I got to go out to work. Blessings. Peace.